Hi, I'm James Johnson, founder and CEO coach. Welcome to Peer Effect, the podcast where your peers will tell you how to 10x your business. Founders often use the phrase launching their business, but this is the first time I've ever had an actual rocket scientist on the show. My guest today, Dr. Schmierer, is the co-founder and CEO of HyImpulse. They build small rockets using paraffin to launch rockets into space. They've raised over 74 million euros and successfully proved their technology with a launch last year. This is the episode for you if you want to learn about the power of a clear vision and how to stay focused on it. So, Christian, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Well, when we were doing the research this, we found out a surprising fact about you as you're a third Dan black belt in karate. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yes. I am practicing karate since I was like 8 years old, 7 years old or so. Recently, I have not focused on it as much as I would like, but I focused on other things.
You've been a little bit busy sort of launching rockets and growing a business.
Yes, correct. Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think you sort of taken across from your karate into being a founder?
I think endurance and discipline is something that's very valued in this sport or martial art. And obviously this helps when you're a founder. There are times when it's very busy and then you have to have a lot of endurance and discipline. And then there are times when there's also difficult decisions to be made, which also are challenging. So in this situation, it helps to be grounded and to have focus ready, and that is something that is also in the martial arts aspects very strong.
I want to come back to this focus later. Perhaps we start then, what's your sort of origin story? What got you here into launching rockets into space?
So I studied aerospace engineering, and the reason why I studied it was that I was already interested all my youth into space, technology, and science as a general. But then specifically, I grew up here in southern Germany, close to a test site of the German Aerospace Center. And so that sparked, of course, my curiosity, and no one in the vicinity, my family or friends, could answer what's going on there in the middle of the forest. And so I got an internship there already during my school time, and that just reaffirmed my plan to study in this field. And when I was then at the university, I wanted to do something hands-on, because I think a lot of university courses are great to give you the background, but how to apply this knowledge into actual projects and technology development is something that I wanted to do. And so I found a student group called Hybrid Engine Development, or short HyEnd. And that was a group that developed paraffin rocket engines. And just when I was there 2 weeks, for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, the student team won a project funding from the German Aerospace Center to develop its own rocket. And that was, of course, a huge opportunity for the team, which already was founded by my co-founder Mario in 2006. But only then, for the first time, it had some money to develop rockets to launch. And that, of course, was perfect timing for me. And then also the other two co-founders joined briefly after me, and the four of us then basically made sure that we launched rockets together. And yeah, that was so successful that we saw that our technology, which is hybrid rocket engines with paraffin as the fuel, matches a specific need in the space market to launch small satellites with a small rocket, but in a cheap way. Something that Rocket Lab in the US does, but in an, I would claim, expensive way. So this was our idea that we then took after we set a world record for the highest flying student rocket back then, that we took and founded into HyImpulse. And then since then we are building our rockets now with the company.
It's amazing. And so today, you've got tens of millions of funding. You're throwing rockets up in space. Perhaps give us a quick snapshot of what HyImpulse is right now.
Yes, we have done as a company, one launch that was in May 24. That was our first flight as a company with a rocket powered by liquid oxygen and paraffin, which is really a disruptive new technology so there are a lot of rocket companies right now in the world, but only a few that actually do something new. A lot of the technology that is used today is from the 60s. It's still the same principles. And the only thing that these companies do, and that's very valuable that they do it, but they implement mainly old technology with new manufacturing technologies. 3D printing is one good example. So it's not a basic revolution of the technology. It's more like how do we apply it and make it affordable. But our approach is to introduce a completely new technology. And so this launch last year for us was a very important milestone because for the first time we were able to show to the market, whether it's customers, institutions or investors, that this technology is ready. We knew it before because as engineers we know how to extrapolate, but to tell an investor, hey, we are the guys with the paraffin, with the candle wax, and we will launch into space, is something else than to show them the video of the rocket actually flying. And so that was a pivotal moment, of course, for us. And now we have raised on this the Series A, and we are preparing the next flight from UK next year. That will happen most likely in summer months. And then we develop our SL1 orbital rocket, which will then launch satellites to space starting in 27. So we're in the middle of the development of this larger rocket, and at the same time launching again the smaller rocket, the suborbital one. So there's a lot of work ongoing, and in the same time scaling up the company to make all these things happen at the same time.
How do you find that then? So that you're scaling up this technology, it's kind of building bigger and bigger rockets, but at the same time, you've got to build this ever bigger company around it because you're up to sort of 70 people now, right? Across multiple countries.
Yeah.
You guys are kind of rocket scientists by background, not business builders. Which do you find harder?
Yeah, I mean, we have, of course, a little bit of talent in this. Otherwise, we would not have emerged already back then at the university as the leaders of the student team. So we took this opportunity back then already to lead the team. So that was also giving us confidence in 2017, 18, then to found the company. And of course, over the last 10 years, our skills in leading a team, building an organization, managing expectations, managing processes has grown as well. And I think engineers in general are very well educated to learn all those things if they also find it interesting. So maybe that's a big difference. So some find it more interesting than others, and those who find it more interesting, they enter in this managerial career, and those who find the technology still more interesting, they remain topic experts, which is also very important because you need those scientists and engineers that are really deep into details of technology. Otherwise, it will not work either. And yeah, we have learned it over time. And I must say, scaling a company is, of course, a challenging task. The technology also remains challenging. And then bringing both together, it's, of course, very exciting, yes.
How big, to achieve your sort of ultimate goals, how big do you think you will need to build the company?
Yes, so this is, of course, depending on the time scale that we are looking at. So in the next 2 years, we want to grow to roughly 150, maybe 200 employees. With that, we will do the additional suborbital launches, but also the first orbital launch or the second even. And initially, we will use also a lot of the supply chain that's available. So that means we can outsource some of the work. And then later on, we will see which of the suppliers will remain suppliers and which maybe are too expensive, and we want to internalize it and grow the business even further to do this stuff internally as well. And then if you're launching rockets and you have access to space yourself as a company, it opens up also, of course, completely new fields of businesses. Yeah. If you look at SpaceX or Rocket Lab is most likely the most comparable company to us in what we aspire to be. Then they are not a launcher company anymore. They're a space company offering satellites and in-space services. full supply chain, and then there's no limit how big the company can get in the end. So I think in 10 years, there's a good chance that we are 600-700 people.
That's some fun building ahead of you.
Absolutely, yes.
I mean, we talked, we're really going to talk this idea of focus. And you said sort of, as you're building your rockets and as you're building your company, space, if you're unlocking space, that feels like a very big frontier to potentially unlock. How do you decide what you're going to do and, importantly, not going to do?
Ooh, that's a very tough question. I mean, one advantage that we have is that we are 4 founders and we take the decisions together. And now we're, of course, not only us 4 founders, we have also a board, we have shareholders that all contribute towards these decision-making processes. But it's always a question of, okay, how many opportunities are there? Which ones are really the most important one? And also, how many can we follow up at the same time without spreading out too thin and then not, and then we might end up not being successful at any of these opportunities, right? So I think it's a constant process and you have to always revisit your previous decisions. Is it still wise to follow up on all of these paths? Or is it sometimes also good to take a step back or pause a certain topic to focus on something? And for us, it's of course always, we have this binary events, I would say. So if you develop a rocket, you will launch it. And you're always working towards this next launch. So it's very easy to say, okay, next 6 months, we have to focus everything on this launch and everything else for now is paused. And sometimes we have to do this, right? And probably starting in the next year, there will be a phase shortly before this upcoming suborbit launch where a large part of the company will focus on that. But the company has grown now so much with 80 people, by then probably will be 100 or so, that we will not have everyone involved on this launch. And then suddenly we are big enough to follow up 2-3 things at the same time. And but how to manage that, or to manage that, is a constant effort, and we have to monitor it all the time.
Two things that really resonate there. One is this idea of having a very clear goal, like launching a rocket can really focus the mind.
Yeah.
But then at what stage do you do the additional things and not put the whole company on lockdown? Because it feels like you can be going, okay, well, we're not doing anything for the next 6 months, but stuff might change, I imagine, quite fast from a technology perspective, from a business perspective. How do you get that balance of when to do and when to pause and reflect?
Yeah, I think, again, I would say the good thing is we are 4 founders and we all have different focuses now in our current roles, which allows us to take also different point of views, right? Of course, from my point of view as CEO, who is reaching out to customers, to investors and stakeholders, ideally we reach all the goals all next year. But it's not possible, right? And so my co-founders, who are then responsible for the technology or for the production and testing or the projects, they will then say, okay, what's actually possible? And then we will find a compromise together, how we can achieve the most with what we have available and the time that's available. And I think I would say this is really an advantage if you have a strong group of co-founders, because if you're alone, then it's very hard to have these discussions internally and to have full overview over all these things if it's a complex technical problem, but also complex organization with a lot of things going on simultaneously.
I mean, I agree, but also I think having 4 co-founders increases in some ways gives an opportunity, but it's also a difficulty in terms of getting alignment, having conversations. I'm just curious about your sort of mechanism for getting together. Is there a regular cadence? Do you have like a monthly, quarterly? Like, what does it practically look like?
Yeah.
Because like if you're doing a good job of that with a 4, there are a lot of co-founders who don't do a good job of that as a 2. So I'd be curious to know what the elements of that sort of collaboration are and how you go about doing it.
Yeah, we try to have a weekly meeting actually, but as you can guess, we don't manage to get it every week. But nevertheless, it's very frequent that we take time to speak, the four of us, and it's surprising. But for the last 7 years, there were almost no problems to decide unanimously at the end, right? So we discuss things out. We have different point of views, but then when we have to decide, we usually agree that yes, this decision, given the current circumstances and information that we have available and the resources we have available, is the best decision. And so we have been very successful in that. I would say it was never a challenge that we couldn't overcome in this way. So it somehow just works. Maybe it's also in this case helpful that we actually are all coming from the same background. We speak the same language. We know exactly what the others want to say and how they think. So I think that's an advantage. It might be more difficult if you have co-founders that come from completely different backgrounds. I don't know, because I have not experienced that.
And so these weekly meetings, you're deciding the strategic things on a weekly basis?
No,
Or
it's
that's
also
more of an operation.
That's why also the frequency of these meetings has reduced a bit, because as the company grows, initially, of course, when you are like 20 people and 4 of them are the founders, then you are involved in every little thing, whether it's planning the next test campaign, the next launch, or who will change the light bulb in the office, right? So everything. That is, of course, now after 7 years and with 80 people, it's reducing dramatically. And we have our great team that's covering a lot of these aspects. So our discussions get more strategic. And that's why you also don't have to do it every week necessarily. But of course, if you look at HR, if you look at really projects that have deliverables and so on, then there is also a lot of topics that require frequently the attention of us because these are really key aspects for the company.
Because one thing I work with clients to do is I like a quarterly cadence, try and lock it down for the quarter, and then but still meet frequently, whether it's weekly or fortnightly, just to discuss some of the operational stuff. And I find if you talk strategic stuff too often, it's distracting. It's kind of like, are we going to launch now? Are we going to launch next week? It's distracting. But there probably is some stuff that comes up. So how do you get that balance of when to talk strategic, when to talk operational? Do you have certain time set aside to be strategic as a group?
Yes, so we have also, of course, in a company of 80, we have now also team members who support us in this, right? It's not like that the 4 of us alone are creating plans and discussing scenarios and so on. We have a team that supports us in that. And then I would say every month we take some time to look at, okay, are we still on track? And is this still the right decision to do this or that? And sometimes more frequently, if it comes up, we discuss it. It's really on a need to do basis, basically.
But it does feel like your sort of key strategic goals are kind of locked in ahead of time, like your 2026 plans, your 2027 launch.
Yeah, exactly.
These big milestones you're working quite clearly towards.
Yeah, we define, of course, also objectives and goals that we communicate to the team. And at least the roadmap to them is clear. Sometimes if the schedule is still a bit changing, nevertheless, every step after each other is clear already 2 years in advance, because we have to plan everything until the flight.
Hey. Is that kind of like a secondary... How far out do you like to plan? Like, it feels like there's this rocket. What's so nice is there's a very clear vision. It's interesting, when I was with Jardine at the beginning of my career, the example they used about team motivation was about putting a man on the moon. Slightly apocryphal story around a guy sort of sweeping the sort of landing pad, and someone's like, "What are you doing?" So it's like, "Oh, I put a man on the moon." It's like it gives the whole team a very nice vision and mission. How much do you feel that helps the team, like that clear vision and that clear mission?
From my experience, different people react differently to mission and vision, right? There are those who rather want to focus on the next few months and find it a waste of time when you think 5 years ahead and discuss what could be and what should be our vision. And then others really for them it's really important. They take a lot of strength out of it to know, okay, we're working towards a bigger goal. And so we have to always balance it. I think that's why you have to think about it. You have to write it down somewhere. You have to make sure everyone can find of it, but you also should not annoy people all the time with it, in my opinion. So we have clearly laid out what's our vision and what's our mission in the next 2-3 years. And that helps, of course, to always guide everyone back to this roadmap and not to get lost in details and nitty-gritty things. But they have to be solved as well. So it's the right balance between it. It needs to be there. I think it's a basic cornerstone of the company to have this kind of vision, and then the mission deducted from it. But then you need to get stuff done also.
And I'm wondering when maybe it's something you know internally but haven't been talking about, but I wonder how far ahead your milestones go. It sounds like 2026 is clear, 2027 is clear.
Yeah.
There's a sort of, at some point there's unknown around what unlocking space means. Do you feel that you have an idea of what 2028, 29, 30 might look like, or are you very focused on 2026 and 2027?
Yeah, I think there's clearly a difference between until the next or the first launch of our orbital rocket. Basically, we have milestones clearly defined, and we anticipate also how long it will take to reach them. And there's a very well detailed plan already. And then after that, it's more general, because then it's a different kind of challenge. It's not so much a technical challenge because then becomes purely a organizational challenge. How do I scale up the business? How do I increase the production capability while keeping the company also agile and not becoming an old company, so to speak. And of course, in this time also the R&D will continue. But for now, the plan is to improve the rocket further. So there's no detailed analysis of what exactly, because first you have to finish the rocket to identify the things that can be improved following the first flight. Clearly, until the first launch, we have a very detailed plan. And after that, it's more like, okay, directional. We have to increase the launch rate. We have to increase eventually the financial output of the company for investors. That's, of course, also a very important aspect that should not be forgotten by the team. That's kind of the framework we're using.
We talked earlier about your sort of engineering mindset. Using that to look ahead from a sort of scaling the company point of view, what do you foresee as being the biggest challenges?
I think what will be challenging is already starting now when you are reaching this number of 50 to 80 employees. You have to think about how is my organization going to look like in 5 years, because we lay now the foundation of how the company will scale. Typically, of course, you have to create some kind of hierarchy inside the company and processes. But how you set them up now will define already how the company will be, how agile and flexible the company will be in 5 years' time. If we do now the wrong decisions and create silos in the company or create processes for everything that are super slow, then of course this is not not helping. And I think we have this always in mind. So we want to keep the agility and a relatively flat hierarchy, which then creates other questions like how do you come to decision making processes? How do you communicate within the company when there's no clear hierarchy line where you have to follow? And these then are questions that have to be answered as well.
I mean, I'd add to that. I think as companies scale, you often see that they become siloed because it's easier to execute in your vertical. They can become very specialist, and then it becomes quite hard to get that sort of collaboration done effectively. But I think also I'm a great believer like the idea of culture, like being quite deliberate about culture, because I think processes are quite easy to determine over time. But I think mindset trumps everything. You can have a really good process, but if you've got the wrong mindset, you might not follow it. You might not hire the right people. And it's quite like when you start, you're in control of everyone you hire. But over time, you almost stop hiring anyone because all the hiring is done by your managers. So how well have you managed to set your expectations, your culture with them?
Yes, I think that's a very good point, and it's actually a topic we have been discussing in the last months. The culture is, of course, something that changes also over time, and we have to put more focus on communicating clearly about it. This is also a field where engineers, especially German engineers, are maybe a little bit more like, this is non-factual. This is like, why should I discuss, or I don't have to worry about this. This is like esoteric stuff, but obviously it's not, and you really have to address it and make sure that also new people understand what is expected, but what is also possible in the company. What's your failure culture, your mistake culture? How do you also, take responsibility? We often see undecisiveness in some ways, like who is now taking the responsibility, and then of course everyone would like to take responsibility, but then no one takes it. So why is that? And that is of course something that can slow down certain developments or projects or deliveries, and it really needs to be clear to everyone that we expect them to take responsibility and that they will not have a disadvantage if they do it, because of course, if you take responsibility, it's natural that you make mistakes. But if you don't take responsibility, then maybe nothing happens, and that's then even worse for everyone. So, when it comes to hiring, we have actually now started to take again a step back, and actually the founders should always have at least one discussion with a new hire. That will go well until we are like 120, 150 people. But at that point, we have then again to find a different way, because then it will be just too much work for each of us individually.
Yeah. I'm just imagining your discussions around culture from that very like German engineer point of view, as you said, like, is this a thing?
Yes, I mean, this is sometimes some people take it on like naturally. They will, when I'm talking now about our second level management, right? There are some people that is like natural understanding of this, and others really have to sit down and understand it. It's not for everyone something that's easy to incorporate and understand.
I mean, maybe to sort of draw the metaphor, imagine like when you're building a rocket, it's easy to like scale the rocket by just making it bigger. But at some point you need to fundamentally redesign it and go, actually, what don't we need? And I think what I see a lot of my clients is that sense of when you're scaling, you hit a certain size. Oh, well, now to scale, we just add more people onto it. But what you end up with is quite a bloated, ineffective organization, because you haven't adapted. Almost you've got to kind of rebuild from scratch and go, okay, what type of person is right? What is our organizational design? What are our behavioral expectations? And how do we make sure, like, what the systems we put in place to do that? And it's a kind of, you end up with actually not a bigger rocket. It is a bit bigger, but it's not just a scaled up version of your earlier rocket.
Yeah, I think it's a very good analogy. That's absolutely right. Every solution, whether it's a technical solution or an organizational structure or whatever, fits always a market niche or a market segment or a certain problem. And when your problem changes or your dimensions change, your market niche changes, whether it's the payload or the size of the company, you have to adapt to it. And sometimes it requires complete changes. Yeah.
I'm glad you said that. I thought for a horrible second, I didn't know anything about rocket design. I thought you were going to say, no, rocket just
No, it's
scales up.
absolutely, it's correct. Yeah, you also don't launch the same rocket from Earth than from Mars, for example, because Mars has a different gravity and a smaller atmosphere, and so you can design a completely different rocket to launch from Mars.
So what is, maybe just to finish up, like if for other founders who are scaling listening, what is one thing that you would share around focus or scaling that they could do off the back of this chat?
I would say always take time to address those topics, even if they are not super urgent within your daily business. So in your daily business, you will always have things that are more urgent, but you need to find time to think about organizational scaling and these from our engineering point of view, soft facts, right? That are not really, I cannot put a number to it, I cannot calculate it, but it's there. Yeah, these effects of how does communication work inside the company, how's the culture, how do people interact with each other, how many processes do we have, are we still agile, all these things. They are very difficult to measure or to calculate even, and nevertheless you have to address them and reserve also space for them. And only then in hindsight sometimes you realize that some of your decisions a few months or years ago really paid off in this area, so you don't see the effects also immediately. And we had a huge advantage. I would say in the long term it will turn out as a huge advantage that we had now a relatively long time, like 3 years basically, since 23, 24 when we did the launch, and 25 where the company was almost the same size all the time, 50 to 60 people, which allowed us to transform from the company that we were before, from 20 people, 10, 20, 30 people, to a company that's now ready to scale into 200 or 300, 400. And I think that was a good thing, but it was never planned. So it was more like also coincidence that it was like this. And only now I realized that it probably was a good thing that we had this period.
Yeah. I think there's all this sense of rush, isn't there? Just like we need to just be a bit further ahead. Now, sometimes you need to go further. You just need a bit of redesign time, retrenchment.
And in this time, a lot of stuff happened on the product development, on the commercial side, but the team was very stable, and that actually helped to prepare the company now for the next phase.
Christmas has been fascinating. I'm going to keep a close eye on these rocket launches. As you say, like the idea of a paraffin sort of candle-powered rocket, on one hand sounds kind of like, how's that going to work? But clearly, it unlocks a whole range of other opportunities.
Yeah, it's the same chemical energy like liquid fuel. So it's just a question of how to do it technically. Yes, it's possible.
Well, clearly, it's amazing. Thank you so much for coming on today. I think people are going to love it, and look forward to chatting soon. Such a great episode today with Christian. I love the visualization of how building rockets really is like building a company. Redesigning at different stages, not just scaling up existing designs, and whether you're launching from Earth or Mars being actually pretty critical. As ever, if any questions, reach out on LinkedIn. Thanks for listening and happy scaling.